There are millions of children in foster care in this country, either with families or in group homes, and many of them are shuffled around from place to place with nowhere really to call home. Systems around the country are overcrowded, with caseworkers carrying heavy loads, and unfortunately, some kids fall between the cracks. How do children end up in foster care? And how can we improve the system so that children, families, and communities are better served? We talked to two Florida foster care specialists and also to a Florida mom who was in foster care herself to gain some insight into the system there and hear what's being done to make it better. Christine Spadeus is the executive director of Florida's Children First. She says that there are a number of reasons why children of all ages end up in care.
A household where we know that there is known domestic violence. Parents have mental health or substance abuse issues, and it's to the extent that they're not able to care for their children. Usually we see cases of neglect. That's the most common type of case, and it usually has to do with those type of issues. And that's why the lack of services in various parts of our state and in various parts of the country really have a great impact on leaving the child in the home safely and removing the child.
Howard Tallenfeld is the president of Florida's Children First, the state's leading child advocacy organization. He says that it's not always just one incident that causes a child to be removed from a parent's home. There are sometimes red flags from previous reports that authorities need to consider.
In many cases, you can see domestic violence. Later, you might see sexual abuse. At other times, in cases, you can see the use of drugs and abandonment of the kids. So what has happened in Florida is it's critical in assessing risk overall to look at the prior cases, the red flags, so to speak, of the types of abuse that have taken place previously, the types of reports that have taken place. Look at the patterns and assess risk using a risk assessment instrument, which is much more effective in terms of making that ultimate determination to remove children.
Once a child is removed from the home, there can be an effort to reunite the parents with the child. Tallenfeld says that the authorities in Florida look at what happened to cause a child to be removed and address those issues.
Typically, what is supposed to happen is that the parents go through a process, if they're taken into foster care, where there is a case plan that's created for the parents, each of the parents involved in the home. And when that case plan is created, the case plan is based upon assessing a parent's needs. What caused the child to come into care? What other factors that show up in the assessment? What happens is they do comprehensive behavioral health assessments that include the parents, the children, to figure out what it takes to make the home safe.
He adds that the system has gotten better and the authorities are learning more about the parents and the situation that the children are in than they did previously. However, there are still problems with the private agencies that oversee the cases.
The other side of the coin is that there are many cases we see in the state where the private agencies that case manage the child are up against a race to beat a one-year reunification period, and so we've still seen many situations where children are returned to unsafe homes because the parents are not equipped to save them. I was looking today at a case involving a recent death where a child was returned home here in Broward County, Florida, where there were very serious indications the mother did not have stable housing, very serious indications she did not receive and was not receiving mental health treatment for schizophrenia. She was returned home and allegedly smothered her child. And the child originally came into care because of an alleged act of smothering.
High caseloads for social workers is a big factor in most foster care systems. Tallenfeld says that in some places the caseload is overwhelming.
I'm just looking at one entity right now, the one in Broward, where they are showing 32.40 is the number of certified cases certified, and the case management ratio, depending upon how you measure, the Child Welfare League is recommending 12.
But heavy caseloads don't always mean bad care. Spadea says that some agencies can make the system work with strong leadership within the organization.
We have an area of Florida where the turnover is less than 5%. where people have been working there since the beginning, the oldest CBC, the community-based care provider in Florida. And that's because they have a culture inside of there where they support and work as a team. And their caseworkers feel like they're not left out in the lurch and making decisions by themselves. They're working together, and their CEO of that company works on call and works with them. So when there is a problem, and there's going to be problems, and there's going to be a mistake made, and there's going to be a bad judgment call made at some point. But when that happens, they don't vilify that person. They support them, and they work with them, and they make the system work better. So sometimes you have to look internally as to why we have that type of turnover.
Not all kids are sent to foster families. Sometimes a child can end up in a group home instead. Ashley Rhodes-Courter knows firsthand what it's like in a group setting. She was in the foster care system for 10 years before being adopted, part of that time in a group home. She writes about her experiences in her memoir, 3 More Words. She says that the group home offered her some stability for a while, but families are better. However, some children need the specialized therapy that can be accessed in the group environment.
While I was there, the kids received both family therapy and individual therapy every single week. We had access to recreational activities and sporting events in the community. I got to stay in one school for longer than I had stayed in any other school. So I think there really is a place. It definitely wasn't a perfect fit for me because I didn't have a lot of the really intensive specialized needs that many of the other children had. Like one sibling group that was there, they had been locked in a closet with their hands super glued to a wall. So, I was exposed to kids that were working through a tremendous amount of trauma and kids that would swallow glass. And one kid ripped off their braces and, ate the pieces. So it's like you're definitely exposed to things that are really intense. But at the same time, group homes provide a setting and fresh staff and the kind of specialized care that maybe a traditional foster home can't provide in some cases. So it's never an all or nothing kind of scenario. And I always advocate that we have a multitude of solutions and possible placements for kids.
The fact that she was in 14 placements in 10 years pinpoints some of the difficulties children and agencies face in finding the right setting for a child. Rhodes-Courter says that there are many reasons why a placement doesn't work out, and a child would be moved to another home.
In my case, sometimes I was moved into a home and then the foster parents would get into legal trouble, or maybe the home was overcrowded. It was only supposed to be temporary. Sometimes they move children into a home to be with siblings and then something happens and the siblings have to be separated, or sometimes children change the level of care. So if a foster home is only licensed for traditional foster care, but the child develops therapeutic needs or medical needs, well, that's a different type of foster home. So sometimes children are moved just because an agency doesn't want to either pay higher board rates, or in one case, they tried to move one of our children to be closer to a biological parent for relatives. And we said, this is crazy. Like, we were happily transporting, it was like an hour and a half each way, but we were doing that because we wanted stability for the child. But, if you have a foster parent who's not willing to do these extras, then children can be moved for the smallest of slights. It could even be on the whim of the foster parent. They literally wake up one day and say, I'm not really feeling this kid. Let's get him out. And then, it takes a phone call.
Rhodes-Courter was one of the lucky ones. She found an adoptive home when she was 12. She didn't make it easy for her adoptive parents, though, constantly testing them with unruly behavior to see if they would send her back. They didn't, and now she's grown up and a mom of 3, one adopted from foster care. She says that she got the help she needed, and this was part of what helped her to adjust.
I think it's essential that families, either foster families or adopted families, have access to mental health services and therapy. My parents contacted a variety of colleagues and professionals when dealing with all kinds of little issues. There were times when I wouldn't eat the food that my mom cooked, or I had an attitude, or I would lie about stupid little things. They were constantly checking with professionals and reading books and staying informed and focusing on why these behaviors were occurring. So I think it's a great idea to have some kind of therapist or someone on speed dial at times to navigate some of these really complicated issues, because just being in foster care in itself is a tremendous loss for children, but it's not one that has to cripple their lives.
Psychological care is important, but so is care after a child ages out of the system. Kids who reach the upper age limit, often it's 18, are removed from foster homes with nowhere to go and only a high school education. Without help to further their educations and find employment, they can end up homeless, in prison, or victims of crime. Spadea says that Florida realized that something needed to be done and instituted a program to give older kids a better start in life.
I am proud to say, because really Florida is really major leading the nation in this one. We give full college tuition in state schools to our kids who have aged out of foster care, or been adopted age 16, or gone into permanent guardianship, or left a relative placement or a non-relative placement. All within the last 2 years, those were added into. So any child that at age 18 is in a relative, non-relative, foster care, or been adopted recently will be able to go to college.
More needs to be done to improve foster care, such as increasing funding for experienced mental health workers for kids. We also need more counseling for families so that problems in the home can be addressed before a child is removed, and to help reunite foster children with birth families if possible. Howard Tallenfeld and Christina Spadeas invite listeners to find out how their organization is changing the foster care system for the better by visiting floridaschildrenfirst.org. You can read a first-hand account of how one foster child made it through the system in Ashley Rhodes-Courter's book, 3 More Words, available in stores and on her website at rhodes-courter.com. For information about all of our guests, log on to our site at viewpointsonline.net. You can find archives of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price.
Do you or someone you love have Parkinson's disease? For the more than 5 million people worldwide living with the disease, seeing a doctor who specializes in Parkinson's can help optimize care. Yet survey results show that fewer than half of patients have ever seen a Parkinson's specialist. Partners in Parkinson's, a strategic health initiative of the Michael J. Fox Foundation and AbbVie, offers free in-person educational events in communities across the country. These events connect patients and families with resources, including local support groups and services such as healthcare providers and clinical research opportunities. Kate Harmon, whose father has Parkinson's, explains.
When my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's, my family knew we needed to get him the best care possible. I attended a local Partners in Parkinson's event and met so many people who are new to a Parkinson's diagnosis. We learned about the disease and met with healthcare providers and other members of the Parkinson's community based right here in our area.
To learn more about Parkinson's disease, attend a webinar, or to find an event near you, visit partnersinparkinsons.org. That's partnersinparkinsons.org.